couldn't attend to their presentations because I was teaching. Hope you enjoy the presentation of the second chapter of my thesis, which is entitled Creative Destruction or Creative Accumulation, the Unifying Role of Innovation Persistence. What is this topic about? Usually, in the traditional literature of the 20th century, radical innovations and incremental innovations, as well as creative destruction and creative accumulation, has been treating as some kind of opposites, but recent evidence has proven that they are more complementary than opposites probably. We will show this later. And for us, this raises a natural question. It's that, does creative accumulation, and we measure creative accumulation as persistent in all types of innovation activities, affect the development of future radical or incremental innovations? Of course, as it seems very rational, it does. But what is really interesting is that the returns obtained from innovation persistence are different across firm age and the sector of activity. It's not the same operating in high-tech sectors than low-tech sectors. A young firm does not innovate the same as an incumbent. Process innovations take relevance depending on which kind of firm are we talking about. But before starting, some theoretical concepts. I plotted this chart. It's very simple. It's on creation, so not very accurate probably. Here in the x-axis you can see the amount of innovations. On the y-axis you can see the productivity of the innovation, and we start with incremental innovations. When we talk about incremental innovations, we are talking about marginal improvements of existing products or processes with the objective of improving the productivity, maybe addressing better consumers, increasing the properties, etc., etc. The other way around, we have radical innovations and disruptive innovations, which more or less are similar but are not the same. We'll start with disruptive innovations that probably explain better radical innovations. When we talk about disruptive innovations, we're talking about products or processes which render, which destroys, to say in one manner, the existing market structure. Yeah? Maybe we're introducing something completely new. One of the examples that Christensen in his book talks about is the hard disk industry, physical hard disks, the new ones which are solid, something like that. That could be an example of radical innovations that disrupted the market. In this context, incumbent firms, which were the ones that had the existing products, must adapt or disappear because their knowledge is considered to be obsolete. But disruptive innovations are not necessarily radical. Why? Because imagine that there is an existing product, I make a minor modification, and I address this product to a market niche that wasn't addressed before. This is considered a disruptive innovation because it disrupted the market, but it's not radical. On the other hand, radical innovations are necessarily disruptive and always are related with knowledge. If we could imagine the path of knowledge created with the first product, when we create another product, the knowledge used for the first is completely destroyed. At first, theory says that disruptive and radical innovations underperform, but then, when some time has passed, they are better off than the previous product. And this brings us to, I'm working. I should have, yeah. To creative destruction and creative accumulation processes. Creative destruction is associated with, at first, when Schumpeter wrote his studies in his book, is associated with young firms, with entrepreneurs, and with radical innovations. He creates some kind of Ricardian equilibrium where there is no significant growth. The value that is created flows from labor and capital and goes through the same combinations of labor and capital. Most of the income is created thanks to rent, and there is obviously no technological process. The role of the entrepreneur in this context is to bring new ideas to the market, to create new combinations of capital and labor, and create real value. Yeah? In this equilibrium, we don't have new value created. An entrepreneur creates a radical innovation, introduces new value, new combinations are established, and this is the economical growth and the economical value that, in theory, in economy we are interested in. But on the other hand, we have the creative accumulation, which is the opposite. It's related with incumbents and to incremental innovations. And what it says basically is that we don't need to create new combinations. If we perfectionate the existing combinations, we can create value anyways. Yeah? We can make products better, we can create a demand for knowledge, blah, 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 blah. As we said at the beginning, and it's this chart that I think it's quite representative for me at least, I will explain it now. We have evidence that incremental innovations and radical innovations are maybe related. Why? If we take, for instance, the product 1, when we are creating incremental innovations based on the first product, we acquire a sufficient knowledge that maybe brings us new ideas to create new products, yeah? Or to transform the industry. So product 2, which is a radical innovation, arises from the knowledge accumulated from product 1. And in the end, it outperformed the product 1. At the same time, product 1 can be also his creation explained from another product that I call product 0. And we don't really know his pattern, but you get the idea, no? I didn't design this slide, but I should. This opens up 4 hypotheses, which are relatively natural also. First of all, does creative accumulation, as shown here, affect development of incremental innovation? Then, are young firms, according to Schumpeter, more radical than incumbents? But also, do they extract more returns from innovation persistent than incumbent? Or the contrary, do incumbents extract more returns from innovation persistent than young firms, etc.? We also create a third category. We consider young firms to have between 0 and 10 years, establishing firms, which is this category between 10 and 20 years, and incumbents more than 20 years. And also across sectors, obviously high-tech sectors are more innovative, but do they extract more returns from innovation persistence than low-tech sectors, for example, scale-intensive or supply-dominated sectors, according to Pavitz's taxonomy? To answer these questions, we used the Spanish Innovation Panel, ITEC. It follows the Oslo Manual. It means that it can be used as the CIS, the Community Innovation Survey, for the whole European Union. Originally, it started in 2003 to 2016. It's not very actualized, but it works well. But in 2003 and in 2004, the survey was not very complete. I mean, the questions that are asked since 2005 are not present in 2003, so we lose a lot of information which is relevant. In total, we have 12 years. We have manufacturing, services, agriculture, but we only keep manufacturers. In total, we have 3,800 clean observations for each wave. They are present in at least 10 successive waves. And in total, we have a panel with 37,000 observations. And the dependent variables we use are firms of turnover due to the introduction of incremental and radical innovation. This is one of the limitations of the work. The answer to this variable is completely subjective. Yeah, is the firm who says, I think that introducing innovations new for me, I earn 5% of my income, but in the end, this may be not real, but we don't have other ways to measure. It's the best one. We have a set of explanatory variables. The most important of them are dummies, indicating persistence in all these innovative activities, internal R&D, external R&D, internal and external at the same time, introducing product innovation, process innovation, and both at the same time. We see that yeah, as we could expect, introducing persistently innovations fosters the productivity of the firm. Something important, we say that a firm is persistent if has developed the innovative activity during at least 3 successive years. Yeah? Maybe, yeah. was going to say another thing, but it's for the other chapter. Other control variables are age dummies and sector dummies. As I said before, we have young firms, establishing firms, and incumbents. Here the differences are not that significant. We see that, yeah, we have the intuition that maybe young firms are more innovative per se, but we exactly don't know. And regarding the sector, we see that the specialized suppliers are the most innovative, but it's hard to say at the same time, without controlling with other variables. In addition to these three agrupations, we have other things like export status, physical investment, cooperation, public investment, etc. The modeling, interesting part. I mean, it's all interesting, but this is the most interesting. As our objective variables were shares of turnover, so we have infinite values between 0 and 1. Using traditional OLS, fixed effects, random effects is not very accurate because the limits are not very controlled. We could say that we could use, for example, censored models, Tobit, censoring the lower extreme and the upper extreme, but Baum, in his 2008 paper, proves that Tobit is good for estimating the extremes, but not that good for estimating the intermediate part. And for this reason, we use generalized linear models, which Papke and Bullrich developed. But we are treating with panel data, so then we are adding 11 mixed effects. Here you can see that C is the fixed effects intercept, beta is the fixed effects parameter, xit -1 are the control variables. UI is the random effects intercept. We interpret it as an intercept because from this model, random effects are estimated through the variance of the fixed effects model. So it's hard to separate the part which is an intercept from the part that affects each variable. So we decide to interpret it as an intercept easier. T are the years to control for homogeneous shocks across the whole sample. IT are the errors, and IT follows a binomial distribution, which is the important thing about the GLM. Yeah, we said that the link for the model is logic. Then we can control that our range of outputs is located between 0 and 1. But then, as we are more or less counting and we have an accumulation near to 0, we use a binomial distribution, and it fits very well the distribution of the data, of course. Other modifications, all the linear variables are transformed to logarithms to improve normality. Then, as you can see here, all the explanatory variables are lagged in one lag to limit endogeneity. Nevertheless, we did another test for endogeneity for a thing that I will explain now. And here you can see the model. You must focus at first in the first 6 rows, and you can see that persistence in all innovation activities is very significant. You can ignore this one. So we could say that, yeah, the first hypothesis is accomplished. It's very rational. If you include a lot of innovation inputs, you will get innovation outputs, of course. If we take a look to the firm age, this is rather surprising. And we can see that the only significant dummy is at 5% is located here. We know that young firms are maybe more innovative when introducing radical innovations, and they extract more returns from them. Exporting, of course, affects. Here we could see that exporting only to the European Union is not very effective because you're in a comfortable market. You don't need to be very creative. There are not a lot of barriers. You don't need to extract a lot of surplus. But exporting abroad and exporting inside the European Union and outside the European Union is very significant. Yeah? If you address a lot of markets with distinct competition, for sure your requirements to be successful are greater. So you need to be more creative. Regarding the technology, here you see specialized suppliers, supply-dominated sectors, based on skill-intensive sectors. We see that all of them, except specialized supplier-dominated sectors, are more innovative. those are the high-tech sectors. It's very rational. And the other one, cooperation is positive, public investment is positive. This is it has been very studied in the literature. But when we interact all the persistence dummies with firm H and the sector of activity, here we obtain the really interesting results and outcomes. We see that when developing, this is wrong, okay? These three should be all around the activities. When developing incremental innovations, young firms extract less returns compared to incumbents. Yeah? That this parameter is negative doesn't mean that the effect of the persistence innovation is negative. It means that the interaction is negative. Yeah? So you could express as a non-linear function, more or less logarithmic. We see that establishing, when developing radical innovations, they don't extract any returns at all, but they are not negative, neither positive. For establishing firms, we see here a negative parameter. I think it doesn't have more importance than that. But when an establishing firms develops persistently process innovations, we see that the returns obtained are larger. And this is very rational also, because an establishing firm is in process of transitioning from a first step to consolidating itself in the market. So this parameter is positive, and incumbents extract more returns from innovation activity when developing incremental innovations, which is very in line with the literature of creative accumulation, etc. And here we have a negative parameter regarding process innovation. I think it doesn't have a lot of importance either. And in the sector interactions, we see also a lot of interesting things. For instance, if we focus on low-tech sectors, scale-intensive and supplier-dominated, we see that they extract, in the same line as incumbents, more returns from innovation activity, but scale-intensive sectors extract less returns from radical innovations when developing, when buying external R&D, but the other way around, where when they develop persistently all types of innovations, in the long term they can be also more radical. With the supplier dominators, more or less the same, there is no negative effect. And this is the most surprising outcome, that the specialized suppliers, the most high-tech probably, extract less returns, more even than young firms, from innovation persistence. For now, I don't have an explanation for that. And science-based, we're talking about Spain extract more returns when developing incremental innovations. And Spain is not a very innovative country, so it makes sense, but they don't develop a lot of radical innovation. You have any questions here? I think it's good to clarify everything. Yeah? Then we can move to the conclusions. First of all, knowledge accumulation, measured as innovation persistence, affect in the long run the development of both incremental innovations and radical innovations. This is obvious, as we said. But young firms, we know that they are more radical per se, so they can innovate without the need of accumulating previous knowledge. But moreover, they extract their returns from knowledge accumulation. Yeah? Process innovation, as we said, are especially relevant for establishing firms, and incumbents extract the most returns from when developing incremental innovations, which is again well established. For the sectors, the same. High-tech sectors are more innovative per se as young firms. Nevertheless, specialized suppliers obtain their returns from innovation persistence, and science-based obtain more returns from when developing incremental innovation. These are a bit of confusing, but low-tech sectors, we explained them. And the most important part, the policy implications. The most important message of the research is that all firms, regarding their age and probably their sector, can become radical innovators if they have accumulated a sufficient knowledge base. Yeah? So if governments are intending to keep on with the technological trends, especially now with all the environmental challenges, etc., guaranteeing that firms are innovating persistently, we know that if firms have incentives to export, to compete, they will be more innovative, but not only more innovative, they will innovate persistently. we will guarantee this point. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. We have doubts. Yep.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing.
What?
Robustness tests.
Okay. Never mind.
Here, as I said before, even if we had introduced that lag, we could say that there is a lot of endogeneity between all these variables and persistence in innovation activities. So what we have done is to keep these variables with one lag, and then we lag first these ones with 3 lags, and then with 5 lags to see if something changes. Nothing changes. So more or less the model captures efficiently the point. And our robustness check, as you said, as you told me one day, maybe these coefficients don't coincide with the marginal effects. In this case, they do. I mean, the value doesn't coincide, the sign coincide.
I have a one remark question. If I understand correctly, your young firms are 1 to 10 years old.
Yeah.
Is that so?
0 to 10.
Sorry?
0 to 10.
0 to 10. But we do know that a high percentage of the young firms die within the 3 years of their existence. So I wonder to what extent your young firms' effects are driven by that. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe what you are observing is so. In other words, is it the really young that die quickly, perhaps because they are successful, they are buying out, or is it the ones that they pass the threshold of the first years, the ones that are causing what you observe? That would be my question.
Yeah, there's a bias that because when we
no, it's just a matter of how do you define the
when we are applying this in at least 10 consecutive years, films that were created and then died, they don't appear here. So all the innovative films had succeeded in their work. So yeah, we have a bit of bias there.
Okay. So you cannot address that. Anyway, and my other question arises from the remarks you made during your story behind the model and all that. So I wonder to what extent, rather than a persistency as a dummy saying you've innovated in the past, wouldn't it be interesting to look at the number of years that have been persistent, because that will give you the threshold you mentioned before. So how many years do you need for your innovative persistency, to hit on your innovation output?
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, here all the.
So you just have dummies. So maybe if you could play with the number of years that have been consistent, perhaps even as a cross effect, you could look at how many years it takes for this effect to hit the market. Because that would be also an interesting. Because you are just saying, okay, yeah, the ones that innovate are successful.
Yeah, here.
But there is more than that, isn't it?
Here the threshold is 3 years.
3 years, exactly.
So with 3 years, it seems that the impact is very significant. So I don't think that if we say that you're innovating during 20.
Yeah, but you might have a lot of heterogeneity there.
Yeah.
You see, you might have firms that hit on the first, or firms that hit on the third.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And you might even have firms that hit on the fifth that are not there because you just use 3 years. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you change that. It's just you add this variable on the number of years they've been persistent and play a little bit with that to see whether you might observe differences on that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, and especially just a comment regarding the survivorship bias is that probably this survivorship bias is more important for high-tech firms, because probably in high-tech firms you either get a hit or die, yes, in 1 or 2 years, yes. So probably this could be important to study, yes. I don't know how, but for example, that's for example, one of your results is in high tech is less important. Your conclusions is less important the persistence of innovation, yeah. Because in high tech, the big importance is the radical innovation, yeah. Because actually the spread of the knowledge is very quick in high tech, in the sense that you cannot keep within the firm. Yes? For example, you can keep in the firm a process or whatever, yes. But once you put the technology on the market, the others will do reverse engineered to see how you put this chip or how you put this, for example, solid hard disks or whatever. Yes. So I don't know. Probably I think that the survivorship bias is more important in high tech. So that's probably something that not for the general paper. Yes. Not for this general paper, but probably for a specific paper to look at what happens just in high-tech firms, for example. Could be interesting to study.
I agree with that. Thank you. Anything else? No?
And also perhaps this idea about being a young firm is not the same across the industry, so using the same typology across very different type of activities, perhaps it makes no sense, because for the high-tech activities, to be young should imply a shorter period.
Yeah, we are using the
Because
OECD
crossover is very important.
Yeah, that's true. We decided to use the OECD definition, but completely agree with it.
And since we are in a PhD seminar, if you have a coefficient that is there, don't say this is not important, because if one is not important, the other ones are not.
It's not relevant.
So either say that,
It-
okay,
interpret-
I don't know how to
interpretation is
explain
not-
that, as you said in the other one. Don't say this is not important. I mean, you see?
Was intending to say
You
that,
cannot
that
focus
this-
on the ones you like.
Yeah.
That will be the message.
my intention was to say that the interpretation of this was not relevant for the analysis.
Okay, no more questions, so thank you very much. Well, we start the last part of the discussion today with Miquel Manjon. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the ECO-SOS Center and Cory and Jose Maria for inviting me to give this talk. It's a great pleasure to be here today with the PhD students. I will say the same of the other faculty members. Okay, so and the second thing I would like to say is that I would like to apologize. Probably you all know that today is the ugly Christmas sweater day, and nobody told me that, so my fitting is not good for today. I apologize. Next time, please, I'll suggest to the director that pays attention to these things that are really important. Because otherwise, speakers end up being a bit ridiculous.
We will do that, don't worry.
Okay, so thank you. Anyway, this is joint work with Karen Miranda and Oscar Martinez. Oscar is a faculty member too, and Karen, and that's one of the reasons I chose to present today this paper, is a former student of this department. Now at the Department of Mathematics of the Autonomous University of Madrid. She's in the dark side, because of maths and stuff. She's nice though. But yeah, anyway. And the other reason why I wanted to present this is because this comes from her PhD. Actually, it's miles away from what she did, but it's based on her PhD. Okay, and it has a third feature that some of you might find interesting. This paper has kind of two parts. This is a theoretical model, a mathematical model that Cory will enjoy very much. And then what we do, and that what Cory wouldn't like too much, is we take this theoretical model to the data and we estimate it directly. So we estimated directly the parameters of the model. So it's what is called a structural model, okay, of growth in this case. Okay, so enough chatting, perhaps. That's the structure of the talk. So first I'm going to try to set the paper in the literature to tell you what this is about. Then I'll briefly present you the model. I'm going to try to do things very simple. If someone really wants to dig in, we might have a word after the talk. I will show you the growth initial equation. This is what we're going to estimate. Then I'll give you some empirical results. I'm going to stress now that this is very preliminary results. because the way we are estimating this, I will say, put it simply, is wrong. Okay, we are estimating the model using a QML estimator, which is really complex, but it turns out that it's not consistent. So we are in the process of re-estimating everything, again using a new M estimator that is presently suggested in the literature in a paper that appeared in the Journal of Econometrics in 2021. And I'll end up with some preliminary conclusions on our results. Okay? Feel free to raise your hands at any point. All right. So I don't know if you know very much about growth, economic growth literature. Okay, but this economic growth literature, which is vast, has largely ignored the idea of a spatial location of the economies. Okay, and in recent decades, a number of studies have tried to do so. Okay, to incorporate the spatial dimensions into the growth, the analysis of economic growth of the economies. Okay, and they've done that in two ways: what is known as models of absolute location and models of relative location. So in a nutshell, what is this? So models of absolute locations are models that account for the location of one economy in the geographical space. So for those of you that deal with data, this is basically the idea of a spatial heterogeneity. Okay, so that economies are different in the space. And for data, this is parameter heterogeneity of our data models. Okay. The models of relative location do something slightly different. That's much more on the economic geography story. They account for the location of one economy with respect to the others. So they take into account the possible interrelations between them, right? This is what is known as spatial dependence, in the spatial statistics. And for us economists, this is what we know as knowledge spillovers. Okay. And again, these two strands of the literature have, grown rather separately, except for a few papers. Okay, and these papers essentially what they do is they follow a standard model of growth, a well-known model by Mark Barrow and others, classical paper on economic growth, and the work of Artur and Koch, which is the first one and today the only one that uses a full spatial modeling into the standard economic growth frame. Okay. So what we do here, what we basically do is we look at the original model of Artur and Koch, and we do a number of extensions. So in essence, what we do is we introduce a spatial heterogeneity and a spatial dependence in the technological progress. I'll show you in a minute what we mean by that. But in essence, in all these models of growth, technology is exogenous. So it just grows exponentially, right? What we're going to consider is that technology, might depend on the other technologies in a way that you will see. Okay, the technologies of the other economies. Okay, so what we do is we do that in the theoretical model, and then derive the steady state equation and the growth initial equation. Okay, and we take that to the data. The important thing here is that we do in a way that our assumptions to derive this equation are weaker than in the literature. And more importantly, perhaps, we show that our assumptions are fulfilled under certain conditions on the variables. So we can exactly say if these conditions hold, our theoretical result holds. Okay. And then we estimate the model. As I said, this is preliminary, using data for European regions. Okay. This has again a lot of problems because, among other things, the model does not consider capital labor mobility. So if you want to discuss that, I already have arguments for you, but I'll skip that again. Okay. So how is the model? Now the model in principle is rather simple. Okay. You've got the standard Cobb-Douglas production function. So you've got Y, which is your output, and that depends on the technology, which is A, capital, and labor. Okay. Alpha is the capital share, and importantly here, the technology, which is going to be partially unobservable, I'm going to tell you how and why. This is assumed to grow exogenously and at the same rate in all the regions. So in every economy, technology grows at the same rate. Okay, that's the standard assumption. So what these people have done in the literature is to say, okay, maybe there is knowledge spillovers in technology. So how do we do that? So basically what it has been done in most papers is to assume that these knowledge spillovers are local, okay? In the sense that these neighboring effects are just limited to your neighbors, okay? So if your technology, you make an advance in technology, in your economy, this is gonna impinge upon your nearby economies, but not beyond that, okay? That, in this sense, the effect is it's local, okay? What Arthur and Koch did was to model technology in a way that these effects are global, so they spread to all economies, okay? This omega, incidentally, is the baseline level, and you got this exponential rate that is constant across all the economies. Okay, so this doesn't vary across economies, right? So what we do, as I said before, is to introduce, heterogeneity in the technological process. So technology differs across economies, and also there is some spatial spillover in this economy. That's what we do here, okay? So with respect to this one, I think there is a new term over here, okay? Now this omega here now is gonna be the unobserved individual specific effects, so what you use in panel data, that you say individuals are heterogeneous and I'm gonna put something that differentiates them, okay? But economically, this is the unobserved productivity, okay, of the nations, right? So this is the unobserved term of the productivity, right? So in doing so, our models actually nest other models used in the literature. Just a graphical idea, right? So our bit on local spillover is this one. So what it means is that, if someone else is having better technology, this is going to impinge on you, and if you do something, that's going to impinge upon your neighbors, okay? And we got a bit which is global, which will spread across all the economies, okay? All right, so it wasn't that difficult, right? Now, here's where things start to be a bit messy. So we need to derive the initial growth equation, okay, at the steady state. So it's going to be output per worker, right? So we do essentially what the student code did. So there's no technicality there, just using some maths, okay? So we rewrite the production function in mass, and then write the steady state equation, assuming the usual stuff, that which in essence means, that the evolution of capital, right, depends on the output saved and the growth rate of the population. Again, that's pretty standard, okay? G is the balanced growth rate. So essentially what he says is that when these companies reach equilibrium, they stay there, okay? When you put all this together, what we get is this, which is very similar to what's been done before, except for this little square thing here in red, okay? This is our differential term, right? Which is basically the spatial spillovers in the unobserved productivity. That's what we have here, okay? Now, from here, the problem is that this is not observed. This is the value at the steady state, so you need to make some assumptions to get something that is observable and then estimate, okay? So what is done in growth literature is to use analog expansions around the steady state, okay? So it's basically an approximation, but if you do that in these kind of models, you end up with a system of first order differential linear equations which are a complete mess and typically cannot be solved, okay? In another paper, we show that can be solved and that the solution is rather complex, okay? Because it involves higher order terms, spatial terms of the variables, but that will be for the future, I guess. Okay? So in essence, the problem is, if I may, is that in standard models, when you do that, you get this constant and something like that. But you don't end up having this unobservable variable again here. Okay? So that cannot be solved easily. So these two guys came with a solution. Okay? Let's assume that this holds. So in essence, in words, what this is saying. This is saying the difference between the output per worker, right, today, and that at the steady state should be proportional across economies, and also for the capital. Okay. If this assumption holds, your result is the standard, convergent equation of the growth models. Okay. So essentially, what it says is that there is conversion in growth. So all the economies tend to end up growing at the same rate, right? Cool. Because then when you do that, you end up with an equation that can be estimated back. Okay, it's a spatial Durbin model, right? One of the problems of this is that you don't know how this is happening. So you don't know how you go from here to here. Okay, so what kind of assumptions or behavior on these variables are you making? That's what we do. Okay, turns out to be again relatively simple. So rather than assuming what they did, we assume something similar, but on an initial time 0. Okay, in essence, this is a definition. Okay, this will always hold. So if that exists, this relation, which is the basis for the solution, holds as long as this other condition holds. So we have now a proof of how this happens. See, if your growth of population holds this equation, then this is going to be true as long as this thing exists. Okay. Fine. Now what? Now what you get is this. This is the relation between your observed output per capita and the rest of the variables. Okay? Which sounds a bit complicated, but it's just this. And what is this? This is known in the literature as is a spatial Durbin dynamic panel data model with individual specific effects and spatial spillovers, which is something very simple that you can find anywhere, I guess. Okay. But in essence, it's relatively simple. Okay, what you are saying is that your variable of output is related to past output of the other economies in the lag. Okay, current output of the other economies, and then your transformations of savings and population growth. That's the idea. And then you have two additional elements, and that's the cool thing. You have an individual effect, which is essentially our unobserved productivity of the economy, and a spatial effect of this unobserved productivity. Okay? Actually, it's much more simple than that because there are a number of constraints in that. Okay? This is similar to other models found in one another model found in the literature, so we're going to use their estimation results to compare with ours. So that will be our benchmark. Okay? And our model in particular has individual effects and especially spillovers that are proportional. Okay? That's one of the constraints that we have. Okay? Now the key thing is that with this model we can estimate directly the unobserved productivity. So we can not only estimate all these fancy parameters, we can estimate this thing, and this thing is an estimation of the unobserved productivity of each economy. And that's something that you cannot do in other models. Okay, more econometrics. The parameters of the model are not identified. What does it mean? It means that with the data that you have, you cannot provide an estimate directly. Luckily enough, there are a number of constraints in the model that allow you to do that. Okay, I will not know that, but if you impose these constraints, you get the original parameters. Okay, that means that you have to estimate it by an implied use. So what is our data? As I said, this is data for European regions. Okay, provided by Cambridge Econometrics. Once you pay, now it's public. We have 14 countries, okay, and 189 regions. We use several samples. So we start using, for example, the period 82-2002 because that's a sample that's been used previously in one paper in the literature. So again, that gives us a benchmark. Okay. And then we use different subsamples. Okay. For instance, we analyze a sample without the peaks. We analyzed a sample without Greece, because at some point during this period there were countries that have some problems, and might be outliers that distort everything, and in essence everything holds. Spatial effects are defined by a contiguity criteria, dependent variables, local real GDP, then you have ratio between investment and expenditures, growth rate of population, and depreciation rate, which is fixed. Okay? The model also has a constant, time effects, etc. Right? That's what you get. These are the basic results. Okay? Now there are plenty of numbers as stars. Let's see what they mean. Okay? So in essence, what we get is what we expect. The signs are what you will expect theoretically. The level of GDP per capita in European regions is largely determined by past GDP per capita, current and past GDP per capita of their neighbors. Okay, so the first three variables. Saving rates has an effect. Okay, positive. But the depreciation rate and saving rate contribute negatively. What does it mean? This means that the richest areas of the European Union are likely to stay rich, okay? And more so if they are geographically close to rich areas. No surprises here. And poor areas can only partially catch up, which is basically the great argument of this literature, if they increase their saving rates or are geographically close to rich areas. Okay? Well, this is basically technicalities. This is a correlated random effect that is tested. But there are still more, because we had our parameters for the technology, which are not there. These are implied parameters that you need to recover. Okay? So in a way, you need to, excuse me for flipping, you need to undo these things, okay, to get the theoretical parameters, right? So you do that, and you get things, like that. Okay, again with two samples, basically we get the same. Yes, there are some effects, but the basic picture remains. So the technological interdependence that arises from this unobserved productivity spillovers shows that our assumed technology holds. So there exists this kind of spillovers. Okay. The growth of convergence, the speed of convergence, which is a standard parameter in the literature, is again, as it is found in other papers, is around 2%. That's found everywhere in every sample over the last 30 years, right? And the interdependence in the technological degree, these gamma parameters, is in favor of one of the models against the other. Okay. Again, alpha is in line with what is found in the literature. We don't find capital externalities at the global level as they did. Okay. So, in summary, what we find is that there is evidence of both local and global spillovers in the stock of knowledge. And on the contrary, we find no evidence of spatial externalities in the stock of capital as before. Okay? We attribute that to our extended modeling, right? So when they did that, since they don't take into account that, this is probably capturing what we find. And now the last bit, which is the one I really like. This is the geographical distribution of the estimated and observed productivity of the European regions. Okay, so this is our omega estimated from the model, right? So you get 1 omega for each country, right? This is up to a scale, so it could be negative, positive, that doesn't matter. What important is the position, right? And the dark blues are probably around here, here, there. Pretty familiar faces, I would say, right? So first of all, there is some heterogeneity in our estimates. So yes, European regions are different in the unobserved productivity. Okay, this distribution in terms of geography basically follows the so-called blue banana. Okay, this banana that holds in between south of the UK, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, and north of France. This is the richest part of Europe. Okay. So in terms of, again, what we did is try to establish some relations with the reality. What we find is that half of the regions in the high productivity group are actually what you might call rich regions. What we mean by rich regions, it means that their average GDP over the period is above is in the upper quantile of the distribution. Okay, these are the richest regions. Okay, and most of them have a high productivity, right? And the same idea will take us to conclude that half of the regions in the low estimates of the productivity are low. Poor countries. Okay. But we can do more than that. We can see what are the spatial spillovers of this unobserved productivity. Okay, so how having a high productivity affects your neighbors, right? And what we find is that regions with large values, remember these are often poor regions, of the unobserved productivity are more impacted by the unobserved productivity of its neighbors. While regions with low values, that is mostly rich countries, are badly affected by the unobserved productivity of its neighbors. So in words, the richer countries don't care about what happens around them, but the poorer ones can really benefit it. Okay? And that's it. This is our paper. What we do is we present a growth model that extends previous knowledge spillover models in several directions. We do a number of things, and we get some results that I think are interesting in terms of the relationship between growth and unobserved productivity in Europe. And with that, I think I'm in time, and I thank you for your patience. And if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Whoa, good, easy.
Okay, two things. You're talking about interdependence, but in reality, I think it's proven that it's more dependent than interdependence. Probably Mediterranean countries are technologically dependent from northern countries, which is a restriction in most of the cases, probably.
Yeah, but when I talk about interdependence, what I mean is that the way we model the spillovers allow for full interdependence. Whether that exists or not is what we try to show in the data.
But then I come to the second part. You said that in order to converge, poor countries or poor regions must save a significant share. But you didn't model capital depreciation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, capital depreciation is there.
It's model.
Yeah, it's computed there. Yeah. It's a fixed parameter anyway, but
you must replace the depreciated capital with new capital, which can be better or the same. But if you're always buying the capital from the technologically
but you are going beyond the model, because remember this is a closed economy model. Okay, we don't have movement of inputs. That's one of the limitations of these kind of models. The good news is that the few papers, two that I know, that we know of, three actually, that have tried to do that, what they find is that yes, the movement of the movement of capital and labor is important, but doesn't change the basic estimates. Okay, so in terms of convergence, share of capital, and so on, that changed very little, right? It is true that it's been done at the mostly, the three of them use country level data, okay? But it seems that even if you put that into the model, the basic results are likely to hold. That's the best I can say.
But this is not exactly capital mobility. It's you're acquired. I mean, the capital in the
It's capital mobility because if you need capital in this model, the only way is to save.
Yeah, but the other capital is not moving. You're acquiring new capital from another region.
To acquire, you need to acquire it in a different country, right? And this
but
is
the other
not
capital is fixed in the other region.
Exactly.
So this is not real mobility. You're just replacing.
No. That's true. Yeah, that's a limitation of the model. Indeed. Yeah. But as I said, our best answer is if you put that, it doesn't change much. It complicates the model, that's for sure, but it doesn't change much. Besides, there is no data at the European level to do that, so that would be complicated. Yeah. Yes, please.
You consider the technological spillovers among European regions?
Sorry?
You consider the technological spillovers among European regions?
Yes, because this is the data, yeah.
So so you miss perhaps the technological spillovers from the rest of the world.
Sure. Again,
Yes,
no mobility. Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. But again, I will say let's not forget something. I mean, if we and that's one of the things we do. If you redo the estimates just with the period 80 to 2000, in which you will expect that this mobility is lower, it doesn't change very much. So the parameters remain basically the same, right? I guess that yes, as I said, I acknowledge that if you take into account this kind of technological spillovers from other areas, global, that may change. Okay, but let's not forget you have here technological spillovers across all the European regions. So if one of the regions gets, by chance, say, a technology from abroad, that will spread to the others. That's what it's behind the curtains in a way. Okay. Now, if this technology only stays in that region, then maybe that things will change, right? But that's unlikely, I will say.
I would
yes.
ask, because you're considering the spillovers among any European region, and so how important is that a region belongs to the same country rather than a different country? Is the spillover the same, for example? Yes, so that could be interesting to.
Okay.
If the question is, national barriers still means something for that, even within the European Union framework?
I think I couldn't possibly give you an appropriate answer with this, right? I think at some point we try to add country effects to see if anything changes, but again the problem here is that what you are assuming is that each of these regions is an individual economy, so they are separately. Using, for instance, country effects might account for mobility, cultural difference, and so on and so forth. But we haven't gone too far on that. I guess that yes. I mean, and in fact, if you look at the distributions, if you look at the distribution of these, of course, within countries there is heterogeneity. Okay. So when I say that that's the blue banana, there are at least 6 countries involved, but only a few of the regions. And I would say that's also very common in all European countries. You have rich regions in some countries that are more or less equivalent across Europe, and poorer regions that are again more or less equivalent across Europe. So when you look at the poorer regions in Europe, you find that there are some French, Spaniards, but also German regions. But in any case, there is definitely this country effect for sure. But no, we cannot answer that with this framework. I don't. You had a question?
So my question is, in simple words, I would say, is it possible to apply a similar approach to within country differences? So, as you said, proximity to the banana area or the blue banana area, would it be possible to apply a similar approach to within a country, the regions or the parts of the country that actually?
You could do that, say, for the French regions.
Yeah.
Yes, you could do that. Here, you see, that's why my econometrician son will tell you. But then your sample is too small. And these models typically, I mean, we are playing with nearly 200 regions, and frankly, I would say we are on the limit.
Yeah.
You see, so if you try to apply that to a smaller sample, okay, well, no, I'm going to reframe that. You could do that in a smaller framework, in a small sample, with the estimator we are working on. Yes, because the M estimator is probably since you correct the bias directly, I guess that you could do that. Yeah.
My second question would be, just in very simple words, a country that is considered a poor country, being in proximity to a country within the blue banana region, actually are better off if they are closer to a stable country. But do we know to what
we did some calculations on that on the paper. I think there are some remarks on that on the paper. Because yeah, this is a scale, so you cannot take the figures at face value. This is just a scale, but you can look at the differences in a scale. So you could say, okay, how big is the spillover of this with respect to this one? Now, how much will this impact in the difference in growth?
Taking into consideration that
I think that there are some figures in the paper, but yeah, the impact was not minor. Remember something like 5-6%. Okay, so that's probably on average difference, something like that. But yeah, it wasn't negligible. So yes, being close by to a rich economy, say, or an economy that from which you can benefit from their productivity. Yes, that could make a difference. Yes. Yeah. With respect to other economies that are not in this geographical position.
And did you see any difference with Brexit?
No, we didn't look at Brexit.
Okay.
No.
Because the fact that the UK is within the blue banana country, and the fact that they've closed
this
the
is
border.
before Brexit. That's I mean yeah. That's also why we limited. And then we had COVID, so we cannot use 2020 either because it'll blow up, I guess, everything. So perhaps if this finally works, what we're gonna wait is to 25, and then we can see COVID and UK in one paper, or 2 or 3. Let's be ambitious.
Very curiosity.
Yeah.
The measure of distance that you are using for
It's continuity. It's continuity.
Yeah, but for UK, how? I understand this idea of what I mean is like that continuity, because you can also write the model in the same terms, but to use another completely different measure of proximity that could be in trade.
Sure.
And maybe you will raise a...
Yeah, but then...
Yeah, I know that you will not speak about geographical...
no, but then you may end up... I mean, the problem with using economically constructed weighting matrices is that they are likely to be endogenous. And if this model is complicated enough, if you put endogeneity there, I don't know. But yeah, in principle, you could do that. Actually, this paper that I mentioned, Lee and Yu in the Journal of Applied Econometrics, that's what they do. They compare... they have different matrices and they compare them. But if I remember, differences were not that important. I mean, between economic
probably
measures.
you will find also more trade between closer.
But again, that was countries.
Yeah.
So geographical distance there matters perhaps a lot. But yeah, you could use all of W's, I guess.
Okay, there are no more questions.
It's a very minor point, because you get a speed of convergence of about 2%, which is quite standard. But this measure is typically obtained without taking into account spatial effects. So whether you may expect a higher once controlling.
I mean, these kind of questions that force you to show the tricks of the paper are really impressive, Jose Maria. I mean, why do you do that? Why do you do that? That's not nice from you. Assume that the speed of convergence is homogeneous. So there's probably a lot of heterogeneity. And one of the things that in a previous version, one of the referees told us that. I mean, you need to put a heterogeneity there, but well, that's a mess again. But yeah, that's one of the things we will probably do. At least test or see whether there is heterogeneity in the speed of convergence. For instance, True and Koch did that, and they did find some differences across countries. So yeah, that's probably, it's again simplifying assumptions. I mean, so it's like the W. When we end up with this, we thought, do you want to put W economic and do lambda heterogeneous and consider endogeneity?
Yeah, but his point about
I got
the
it
W
to your head.
matrix was that if you compare northern region, quite big, very few neighbors. If you compare that with UK regions or Central Europe regions in which they have plenty of neighbors, so that perhaps you may test alternative measures of continuity, like distance or like n number of neighbors, n closest neighbors, for instance, in order to provide some robustness to your result.
Yeah, but you see, my personal opinion with this kind of models is that they are very complicated and they are trying to account for a lot of things. So since the problem is that this might end up being over parameterized. So in other words, the more things you put here, the more difficult it is that you can find something here. Say. So my intuition is that being so complicated, anything that complicates more, it's not going to change very much, because you already have been accounting for a lot of things. You see, at least this is my impression. On the tests we've done, when you start changing things, not many things happen, because these are already very complicated. It's a very ambitious thing to do, I guess, modestly, if I can say that. So you're trying to account for a lot of things. So the moment you change, I'm going to use that, it doesn't change very much. Yes. Because okay, yeah, you may change the colors here, okay, and rather than this one might be a bit darker, okay, but not very much is going to change. I guess the blue banana is going to be there always, and Portugal, Spain, Greek, and Italy are always below. No matter what you do with the model, sorry, that's the reality, and this is what you get. But yeah, that was a simplification. Yes, the 2% probably comes from there. Yeah, but there is heterogeneity.